the best you could, but you don't learn Torah to the best of your ability, then you deserve karas. It's very extreme. How do we know that it shouldn't be so bad? Because we find that if someone can learn so much Torah, he's working and he has daigis parnasa and he has other things in his life. So we say that there's a minimum requirement. You have to learn a parak in the morning and a parak in the evening. And if you don't learn a whole day, what happens? You're fine. Because why? Because you did what you're supposed to do. You don't have other time to learn, so you find time in the morning and the evening to learn. Suddenly, someone that does have time to learn and he doesn't do it to full of his ability, he deserves kares. How could you say that? Says the Alter Rebbe. And so really, all these questions are driving us to the question of what's Torah? What is the significance of learning Torah? We learn in Tanya about it. He speaks about in Tanya Perik Dal, the Perik Hey. But here he explains in a very interesting, fascinating way. Torah is called a mashal, a parable of the kadmoni, of the original one. Who is the original? The Eibishter. The Eibishter is called kadmon. The Eibishter, who's the originator of everything. Where do we see that the Torah is called a kadmon? The Torah is called mishal hakadmoni, a mashal for the Eibishter, for the kadmon. Moshe Kosov, like it says in Navi Shmuel, Kasha Yoimar Mishal Kadmoni Midasham Yitzay Rasha. The Pasuk here says that when it says in Mishal Kadmoni, meaning to say where it says in Torah, so we see the Torah is called Mishal Kadmoni, and there he speaks about Midasham Yitzay Rasha as the point of the Pasuk there is to bring out a certain point. But what do we see? The Torah is called a mashal. It's called a parable. Where else do we see the Torah is called a parable? Lahavin mashal umalitza. Shlomo also calls the Torah a mashal. What is he saying? The Torah is a mashal. Shlomo was famous. He used to teach Torah. Shloisha Allah from mashal. He used to teach Torah and 3,000 mashalim. What does it mean? So first, understand why Torah is called a mashal. You have to first understand what does it mean kadmoni. What does it mean? The Eibush is a kadmon. We say the Eibush there is the first, right? If you'll say the Eibishter is the first, literally, it's an insult to the Eibishter. It means that there's many, and the Eibishter is the first of the many, right? It's like you have you have 7 midas. So each midah is one that's connected to the other ones. So the first midah is chesed, and then the other midas. So we're going to say the Eibishter is the first of many. That's totally not what the Eibishter is. We learn, the Rambam says, the Eibishter is mechuyev hametzias. The Eibishter is the only being that has to be. Nothing else has to be, because everything that exists based on the Eibishter. The whole existence of everything else in the world is because of the Eibishter. But the Eibishter's existence is not because of anything. So when we're speaking about the Eibishter as a kadmon, as the original one, we're not saying that he's original compared to the rest. He's the first. He was the first one that came. He discovered America. Columbus was first because he discovered America. No, the Eibishter was not first because he was the first one that arrived to this world universe. The Eibush is the first because he's the only being that existed. He's the only being that does exist till now. Everything else that exists is the existence is only there because the Eibush made it exist. So why is it important to know this? Because we're trying to describe the Eibishter. The Torah is a mashal for what? For kadmoni. For which part of the Eibishter are we trying to say the Torah is a mashal? It's trying to say it's a mashal to the level of the Eibishter where nothing else matters, where nothing else exists in comparison to the Eibishter. So what we're trying to say, in the words of Chassidus, we're trying to say that this is not the Eibishter who is V'malach Olam, and it's not the Eibishter who is Sovev Olam. I'll explain why. But it is the Eibishter who's the Kadmon, who's beyond this, which is Oid Ein Sof. That's what you're trying to say. And it's Kibchinas Sovev Kol Amim, V'malach Kol Amim Zel Masher Nimshach V'menu Yizbarech Ha'ara Liyes Chayos Loilamos. Because so for example, right? We're trying to explain why when we say the Eibishter is the Kadmon is the first. Why can't we say that the Eibishter is first because he's V'malach Olam, because he creates the worlds, or because he's Sovev Olam, because he's above the worlds? He's also a great thing. But these great things are very limited. For example, when a person's body functions, right? How does a person's body function? It functions because it has a soul, has a nefesh. It gives it the energy to function. How does it give it its functionality. The nefesh gives the different parts of the body different functions. It gives the brain the ability to think. It gives the hand the ability to move, and it gives the eyes the ability to see, etc. and etc. What happens if the nefesh would give the hand the ability to think? It wouldn't work. Each part of the body has a part of the nefesh that relates to it, that gives its functionality. That's one part of the nefesh. That's one part of the nefesh which makes every part of our body work properly and do its role. But that's one level of energy that a person has, that our bodies have. But then there is a general drive that a person has. There's a drive that allows our body to work in unison, to work in harmony, right? For example, a person wants to dance, he wants to dance. So it's not just going to tell his hand to dance this way and his mind to think this way and his feet to dance that way. It's going to all work in one shot. His hand and his legs and his head are all going to dance together in harmony. Each one will do their function, but it's going to work together. What makes them work in concert? What makes them work together in harmony? It's because the nefesh has a koyach, which is a overall general koyach that drives the nefesh, that gives the body. So it comes from ratzon. It comes from the will of the person who's makif on the person, and it allows the whole person to function properly, and which then in turn allows that each part of the body should function according to its ability. So those two levels in a person are similar to what we say by the Eibishter, the world has to function. In one hand, the world has to function in a way that each part of the world should function according to its level. In order for it to function, it needs to have the chayas dressed according to where it's up to, which is Mamalach Alamim. And then it also has a general chayas, a general koyach, which is equal in all the olamis, which gives the world a drive, it gives it the direction, it gives it the purpose, and that's Seif Kulam. But if there wouldn't be a world, would there be a need for Mamalach Alamim, Seif Kulamim? The same way that by a person, if there wouldn't be a body, there wouldn't be a need for the nefesh to give energies, whether it's in the specific energies or general energies, there won't be a need for that. The whole reason why there is the energy there are to serve the body, to give the body what it needs. And so too, the chayas in the world, from Malach Olam and Seif Olam, the reason why they're needed is because there is a world. So in a sense, the whole purpose and the whole being of Malach Olam and Seif Olam, even though we're saying it's the Eibishter, that's a Malach Olam, the Eibishter, that's Seif Olam, but the whole reason why the Eibishter allowed this to be is because there's a world. So could you say that this level is Mechuyev and Messias? It's a level where it's only Eibishter? No, the fact that it's there means it's a world. It means it's a world that's relating to. So we have to, if we're talking about Kadma and think about the Eibishter, talking about a level that is before any ability of Messias. That's why he says it's Oir Inside. And he explains inside. Even Seif Kulam, which is removed from the world, is also connected to the world. It does give chayas to the world, but it's in a makif way. Obviously connects to the world. The Eibishter himself, his essence, you can't even say that he's hovers around the world. That's why it's called Kadmoinai, the originator of the world. Now that's the Eibishter. He's called Kadmai. Mashal Kadmoini is a Torah. Torah nikra Mashal Kadmoini, and it's a Torah. He Mashal Kadmoini Shal Olam. Shekamoy Shadiyam Mashal Yusag Hanimshal. Kachalidei Shatamud Biyadai Yiske Lagili B'Kinaziv or Remain Seifaracho. Mashal Lamanach Seif Kalamim Malakalam Ve'ena Begadam Klam. Because the Torah is the vehicle with which we could grasp Kadmai. So, and we're going to skip here.
1 second, it hasn't answered why Dr. Torah should Basir.
Why? So there. We're real slow. Why Torah? Why is
of our world?
So we'll explain more. We'll just say we're going to skip till a bunch of lines down. Will be 5. What was it? 13 lines from the bottom. V'lachin Torah. Before we go inside, I'll explain what he's explaining. 13 lines from the bottom. So he's explaining that what's the idea of a mashal? A mashal is if you want to grasp something very, very great, or even something which is a deep concept, you can't just tell the person, someone that doesn't not familiar with it, you can't just tell him that concept and he'll understand. And so you have to lower it in levels that the person relates to. You have to find something in common. If you're a wise person, he's a simple person, you have to speak to him in a language that he understands, something he relates to, a world that he relates to, and bring the concept down in that way. For example, we know in this world, apple tastes good, right? There's different types of apples. There's sweet apples and there's sour apples. So let's say sweet apples and sour apples. So we think that the reason why they're sweet, the reason why they're sour is because that's just the way it happens to be. This is this tree, and that goes to this tree, and that goes to that tree. It says in Chassidus, it says in Kabbalah, that the source of this sweetness from the apple is from a higher sweetness. The source of the sour apple is from a higher sour source. For example, in music is more refined than an apple, than food, right? Food is physical. Music has a more spiritual tone to it. It's notes. It's physical, but it's already more relatable to spirituality. And music, you also have two types of music. You have a more sweet music that easy on you, and you get a more positive energy. And then you have sour. You have a music which is more farfetched, more deep, more introspective, and that's the sour music. If you go even deeper, you have also in wisdom. You have some wisdom that's smooth and pleasurable, and then you have wisdom that's hard and it requires effort. But after all the effort, you've come to you have a geschmack. You overcame that challenge. That's the sweet and sour in intellect. And if you go even higher in Elikus, in Kedusha, there's even also sweet and sour. So there's a lot of layers. And something physical is only a layer, is a muscle to something higher. And so Torah is written that way. Everything besides Torah, everything else in this world that was created through the concealment of Hashem, total concealment. Hashem, in order to create the world, he had to remove Eibishter. The more the Eibishter is removed, the more the world is created. Right? The physical world is the most physical. It's the most, why? Because it's the least Eibishter. So that allows us to feel independent, to feel ourselves, as opposed to higher worlds that are more able because they have more Eibishter and less us. As opposed to so most things in the world are created out of a lack of elikus, out of a lack of kedusha. On the other hand, Torah is not there to conceal the Eibishter. Torah is there to transmit the Eibishter through a vehicle that he knows you can handle. And that's a mashal. So he does water down the course, but on the other hand, even though he waters it down, he hides in the Torah the true essence of himself. Right? You may say an apple is a very watered down version of music. It's not, right? Is it how similar is an apple to music? It's not. I mean, you need an apple to help you sing. I don't know, but it's not so close. The only what is similar, that both of them have a sweet and sour tone to it. So that means the message of sweet and sour gets carried through in the apple also. So the Eibishter, when he gives his Torah, in the Torah, he continues that message. He has a message, a hidden message in the Torah, but he conceals it in a cow and a donkey, and they fought, and the donkey, whatever, all the halachas in Torah that speak about all these physical matters, and we're getting distracted with all the matters, but really those matters are a mashal of the inner secret that's hidden inside the mashal. Now, the lower he has to go with the mashal, the harder it is to get to the nimshal. So this world is the lowest world, so it's much harder to get to the secret. But it's still in depth. If you learn it properly, if you learn it the way you're supposed to, and you use your time properly, then you'll get to the secret of what the Torah's message is. The lachan Torah, that's 13 lines at the bottom. Starts the line starts with chachma. The lachan Torah the mechachma nafkas nikas mashal hakadmoni the kemoya mashal. Afal pisha enim mehusa nimshal klal. Im kol zeh hanimshal melubash v'sech hamashal boy v'yadi dafki yasigu hanimshal. But yes, the mashal and the nimshal are very far off. The apple and the music is very, very different. But through the mashal, you'll be able to get to the nimshal. Kach chachma v'atayra hi levush lo yonsei berachuk. Mashkasav oiter v'sama v'lachan adi eisek atayra yochol hanes miziv or yonsei berachuk mamash v'chus hakadmoni she'olam. And that's the key of Torah. What is Torah different than everything else in the world? The Torah is the key to actually grasping kadmoni she'olam. The highest of the high is grasped in the Torah that you learn. I'm going to skip again. So now he's going to explain the questions we had earlier. We had a question, why do we say that if a person, in order for a person to come to Gan Eden, he has to fill himself with Torah in this world. The Torah in this world is at a much lower level than Torah in Gan Eden. Why is it important? So he says, in order to understand, we're trying to understand the nimshal. We're trying to understand the secret. To understand the secret, you have to climb the ladder. You can't skip stages in the ladder. If you don't understand the details of the mashal, you may miss something in that secret. If you don't learn it properly. Without understanding properly the mashal, you won't get to the nimshal. Skip the parentheses. The Torah is the mashal. The Torah we're learning in this world is the secret, is the mashal, the parable that helps us understand the Eibusher himself. Okay, Hatev, Amashal Hatev, as Dafka Yuchel Lexis and Nimshal Shunoyam Avaya as Bia Tzachas Nafshoyim. So he says that is why it's so important to maximize your potential in learning Torah in this world, so that in order when you go to Gan Eden, you reach the next level, the mashal, you'll be able to get to that level because you reached the first level. And that's why he says, we'll read it inside, that me, She'efsher, I want to get some Purim here, so I'm going to whoever wants that, who's supposed to learn Torah, and he doesn't fill his capacity of learning Torah as he's supposed to, he deserves Karas. What does it mean, deserves Karas? He cannot connect himself to the Eibusher. Here he's a chance through learning Torah to connect to Eir and Seif Baruch. You can't do it without learning Torah. If you skip the steps, you're not going to get there. So if you're going to learn, if the Eibusher told you that you're someone who's working, you don't have time to learn Torah. So he tells you, Allah says that if you don't have time, you learn Perek Echad Shachat, Perek Echad Arfis. What does that mean? That means that your neshama, in order to reach the secret of Torah, all it needs is to learn 1 hour in the morning, 1 hour at night. That will be enough for you to understand the depth of Torah. You're going to be missing some parts of Torah. So he says, first of all, either it's because your neshama is at a level that your requirements to grasp is lower, or he says that Eibusher will help you reach the higher level without your effort because you're required to do so. But if you're a person that has time to learn Torah, and you don't maximize your potential, the fact that you had the ability to learn Torah means that your neshama is such that it has, in order to grasp the nimshal, it has to know all the details of the mashal. And if you skip some lessons in class, you're going to miss the instructions to get to the next level, and therefore you're not going to connect to the Eibusher on the highest level. And let's skip to the next paragraph. Kach hine, the last paragraph on the first column of 196. The kach nigam lamayla harei ein kol hasagas shal neshamis shavim v'yesh mehem madreges mailas and kates Marzal calls tzadik nichvim v'chapas chaveiroi. We say, okay, so we want to read it. Okay, let's finish it up. So let's skip this paragraph here. But we just explained it that a person that is able to learn Torah and he doesn't learn Torah, he's missing out in his understanding of the mashal properly. So what does that have to do with Purim? What does that have to do with Torah? So now we appreciate what Torah is. Let's see what happened to Matan Torah. Matan Torah, the Eden only were able to reach Matan Torah after they were in Galus Mitzrayim. Why? Says Alter Rebbe, because Galus Mitzrayim was a crushing experience. It was a torturous experience. That crushing created by them a vacuum, a level of bittul, that they became vessels to accept. I'm not going to, because a lot of time, I'm not going to go into the whole deals, but he says, probably we won't read so much inside. He says that through the crushing, they lost the sense of self, they lost the sense that they are powerful. They realized there's something greater than them. What is the greater thing? It says Alter Rebbe, that they weren't ready to accept yet what the greater thing was. How do we see? Because when they left Mitzrayim, it says that the Eibusher had to schlep them out. Why did he have to schlep them out if they were in a high level, if they were such a bottle? Because their bittul was true, they were bottle, but they were able to be swayed very easily, and that's why they're almost in the Mem Teshari Tumah. They were almost, some Yidden were almost deep into the biggest, they were in the deepest Tumah, because they were a vessel, and the vessel could accept anything if they're not prepared properly. But when it came to receive the Torah, ask a question?
Yeah. Doesn't Rambam say that
that happened, the Avodah Zarah with the Yidden happened shortly after Yaakov's death, then the Yidden, except the Levium, like started doing Avodah Zarah. Right
Yes,
after.
definitely there was.
And it was because of his death, because like.
Yeah, so I mean, that doesn't really hear so much about why it happened, but the truth is that yes, a lot of Yidden were experiencing a low in Yiddishkeit, right? But what he's saying is that even though they were not ready, they weren't ready in a high level, but they had the humility through the crushing experience of Mitzrayim. They had a certain humility, but that humility wasn't enough to get them to receive a title, because, like you said, they were a desire. They had to go through refinement, and they weren't ready for it. So it came out in Torah, and the Eivisher wants to give them the Torah, but they're not ready. They're a vessel, but they're not full. The vessel is not full of Torah. So the Eivisher had to shine, had to do something which to help them get ready. In order for them to say Nasav Inishra, in order for them to be willing to accept the Eivisher without preconditions, he had to shine on them. He had to hover over them a mountain, a Har Kegigis. What was that? Says Al Rebbe that what was this? It was. We'll read it. He had to hug them with his right arm. How interesting is it that we're taking Har Kegigis, the biggest what's it called? What do you say? The pressure cooker that you think of, the mountain of a death, almost near death experience of Har Kegigis, and you turn around and says, no, it was a big hug. It was a beer hug. And he explains. So what does he say? He says that how's the Eibusher? The Eibusher had to smother them with love in order for them to want to turn to the Eibusher. What happens when someone wants to show expression of love to someone else? There's different ways. There's different forms of showing love, right? You could look at someone closely, lock eyes. You could smile to someone. You could kiss someone, right? There's different ways, but all of them are usually through a face-to-face interaction. They're both looking at each other and both panim and panim. The interesting thing with a hug is, how do you get a hug? You wrap your hands around the person's body to the other side, to the back. Either both people do it, or whatever the other hug starts, and then through holding the back, that's how you get close. So if you think about it, it's not really it's the opposite of what a love should be. Love should be close connection, not usually if you're looking at someone's back, it doesn't show sign of love. It's a charaim. It's not a close connection. It's a distant connection. So why do you have to hold their back? So it says the Alter Rebbe that this is that type of love that you know the other person has love for you, but maybe they're not on the same level as your love. So you want to bring them in. You want to show them, in a sense, not only show them, you want to hold them in. You want to not let them leave. When you show them that you're so serious about your commitment to them that you're not going to let them leave, you're going to hold them, lock them there, so to speak. You don't let the negative go away. Then the love becomes very intense, that they both become very close. And that is what happened to Matan Torah. The Eivisher saw the Yidden, so they were struggling. They were willing to accept it, but they were not there yet. They need work. So the Eivisher wrapped around them and he forced them through a force of love. He shined so much love that their love forced them to respond. They couldn't ignore that love. And that was so intense that the Yidden said, Nasav and Ishma. We're going to take it on no matter what. That was what happened by Matan Torah. So what's wrong? So that's a great thing. So what's Purim more than that? Right? So he asks. So let's do a few lines inside. No, actually, we'll learn to that next one. Okay. So says the Alter Rebbe that this love of the Eivisher Yidden was a hug because the Yidden were ready for it. So now that they were hugged, and now that they showed their love back, what happens? Are they ready on their own now? It was the Eivisher that initiated it, so they couldn't do it on their own. So who would say that next time, when they want to show the love to the Eivisher, would they show it? Maybe the only way they could show love is if the Eivisher initiates it. They couldn't do it on their own. So that was the Eivisher wasn't certain that their commitment was such that they're able to connect to the Eivisher in such a deep way on their own. And that's why it says the last two lines of second column of page 196. So second column, 196, the last two lines. Zel Pirush Moshe Amar Azal Mikan Meida Rabba Lo Raisa. That's why there's a disclaimer. That it's just oides believim lekabbalas haTorah b'chinas mesiras nefesh u'bitul. Ashek dim v'nasal nishma lo hoya zemitzidam b'bchira v'ratzon asher mi'atzum levad. This choice that they said Nasiv and Nishma, they're willing to accept the Eibishter without preconditions. This wasn't on their own. Only after the Eibishter awakened by them the love and showed his love to them, that's how they were able to awaken their love to the Eibishter. What happened in the time of Achashverosh? Then they were willing to accept it. You're going to say, well, Achashverosh, they also were forced to do the Eibishter. They also were forced. Haman forced them. So the difference was that intense love that the Eibishter showed, he didn't show in the time of Achashverosh. That was a difference. In the time of Matan Torah, the Eibishter shined them with that love, that forceful love. By the time of Mordechai, that's the time of the story about Haman. When Haman made a decree, then the Eibishter let the Eden alone and said, let's see how you do on your own. Let's see what you're up to. That's what you're made out of. He did not have that revelation, that love, and the connection through the hug, like it was Matan Torah. At that point, it was a hidden time. How do we know? Because Esther, it says Gemara. How do we know Esther? Where's the source of Esther in the Torah? Esther in the Torah minayin. Then at the time of Esther, there was a hiddenness. There was a hiddenness from the Eibishter. They on their own did not have inspiration. They had to find inspiration from within. They couldn't ask the Eibishter to give them inspiration. And because they found inspiration from within, through Mesiras Nefesh, that's how he saw that they really, on their own, love the Eibishter. And the commitment was, and they're ready to learn the Mashal Kadmani. They're ready to grasp, to connect to the Kadmani. So now, let's see. He asked you this. So we say in the Pasuk in the Megillah that Mordechai's name, what was his name? He calls him Ish Yehudi. He was a Jew. He was a Yehudi. And then he says Mordechai ben Yair ben Kish Ishimini ben Mordechai ben Yair ben Kish Ishimini. He was Ishimini. He was a man of Yemini. Why is he called first Ish Yehudi and then it's called Ishimini? So why is he called Ishimini? Because he was from Sheva Binyamin. Binyamin is Yemini. So it's called Ishimini. Why was it called Yehudi? He wasn't from Shevet Yehuda. Why is it called Ish Yehudi? And furthermore, he says, in Lama Karala Yehuda, the who al Shem Shevet Yehuda. Yehudi would mean Yehuda. And he's not from Shevet Yehuda. V'gam, tzach lahav the b'gzeiras haman emer lahashmad lahareg haYehudim. It was a decree to kill all the Jewish people, all the 127 countries in the kingdom of Achashverosh, made up from all different Shvatim. So why were they called Yehudim? If it was from all other Shvatim, the decree was for all the Shvatim. Why were they called Yehudim? Because they had that bittul. We said the Yidden were in the stage of Mesiras Nefesh during the Gzeira, because by them, all the Yidden at that Tkufa shined the bittul. Yehudi is from the word Yehuda. Yehuda is Haidah, is bittul, is acceptance of the Eibishter. Accepting the Eibishter no matter what, whether we understand or we don't. We're saying davening shmonesi moedim anachnu lach. We're accepting the Eibishter, even if we don't understand. And that's where Yehuda gets his name. Shevi Yehuda, Apam oides havaya. I'm gonna accept Hashem. Also means thank you Hashem. But here in this context, it means accepting even though I don't understand. So the Yidden. So first of all, we see from here that the Yidden were the stage of Mesiras Nefesh and Bittul. We also see that who was the catalyst, who was the one that helped the Yidden get to Mesiras Nefesh. That was Ish Yehudi. It was Mordechai who was the Ish, who was the Sar, who was the minister of Yehudi. He was the one that helped develop the Emunah, helped develop the Bittul and the Haidah and the Eibishter into the Yidden. And then he says, who was the opposition of Mordechai? Haman. Haman was from Amalek. Amalek was the opposite of Bittul. Whatever Haman was there to oppose was Gasus, is Gaiva. And he was opposing Mordechai. And we'll learn over here on the top of the next column about Haman, the fourth column, the last word, the first word. The Amalek, Haman's from Amalek, who got Saruach, who gracious land. Haman's is the epitome of Amalek. He was an anacle of Amalek, and he represents Gas Saruach, the haughtiness and Gaiva. Gas Saruach, he showed us a Chomin Yisrael. But Lachan Haman shu Gas Saratza lahashmid lahareg es chol Yehudim shem chinas bitol heipech hayeshes v'gas. Haman saw a threat in the Yidden because the Yidden were the opposite. Were trying to make space for the Eibishter. They were mevatel themselves to the Eibishter. And Haman was the opposite. Haman was fighting any bittul. He wanted to show that he's the greatest. All Haman wanted was that the Yidden should not recognize the Eibishter. That the Yidden should go around saying, "I am the greatest." They shouldn't say there's an Eibishter in the world. And if they were willing to denounce the Eibishter, it says here in the Maimer, Haman would have nullified the decree. He was willing to do that.
Yeah, 12 months also. That
12 months.
12 months.
How do you know that he was willing to give up on the decree if they were going to denounce the Yiddishkeit? Because who was the Gzeira? It wasn't on Yisrael, on Am Yisrael. It was on Yehudim. It was on someone who's called a Yehudi, someone who is bottled to the Eibishter. That's what you're saying now. In the fifth line, every single Jew in that kufa, Allah al daitam, not only did they not practice Avodah Zarah, they didn't even entertain the thought machshavas chutz shalom. Or masur nafsham al achdusi yizbarech zel bittul hanal. So he says that the Yidden at that point were willing to meiser nefesh because if any moment they would denounce the Eibishter, they were free. They wouldn't be in the decree, and yet they knew that, and they stood fast for a whole year, like the 12 months, and they did not willing to give up because by a Yid has in himself this ability, this bittul that's in himself. And the first time it was expressed in such a way that all the Yidden together showed bittul, showed Mesiras Nefesh was on the time of Achashverosh, and that's why they finally accepted upon themselves what was started in the time of Matan Torah. So we're not going to continue to explore the more explanation, but I want to answer the questions we started off. We asked, how much more should we
answer the question?
So he says, we asked the question, why are we saying that Purim is greater Yontif, is more Simcha than all the Yom Tovim? Why should it, if all Yom Tovim we had said is a greater, Yom Tovim were greater, there were bigger miracles, they don't do Malacha. So he said like this. And all the Yom Tovim it says, Rana Tzadikim B'Havaya. Every Yontif we say in Kapitel, we say in Tefillah, Davening, we say Rana Tzadikim B'Hashem, the Kapitel, the Tzadikim praise Hashem, they rejoice in Hashem. Havaya is the Eibishter way he relates to the world. So they're rejoicing in the Eibishter, how he relates to the world, because even the Simcha is a limited Simcha. Because Taka on Yontif, there's a Hamshacha from higher than the world into the world. So it's not just in the world, it's above the world into the world. But it still has to fit into the formalities of the world to some degree. And therefore, the Simcha is a limited Simcha. And in Purim, we just said that Purim revealed the essence of the Yid, who's through Torah connects to the Kadmoni, to the Eirah Seif, to the Eibishter, which is higher than the world. When it's a level of higher than the world, it's higher than Seif and higher than Mal, it's higher than the world entirely. So when you tap into that, you have no boundaries. Then Simcha has to be also no boundaries. The Simcha is limitless. On the other hand, he says that when it comes to Malacha, I'll put him allowed to do Malacha. Why? Why are you allowed to do Malacha if you're at such a high level? He says that's exactly the point. Why on Shabbos and Yom Tov do you have to stop working? Because Shavisa of Malacha, stopping work, helps you just like by a physical body. After a whole day of work, you stop working not because you gave up, you lost hope in your work, you resign, you can't do it anymore. No, because you know your body needs energy, so your body withdraws back to itself to regain energy to start tomorrow again. That's the process. So too in the world, the Eibishter, he creates the Malachas, creates the world, and the world has to be able to regain its connection to the Eibishter, so it has to rest from its worldly matters, and it connects to a higher source. That's what Yontif is. Yontif is where the world reconnects to its source to be able to give it energy to continue functioning. I'm saying it very short. In Purim, we're talking about the Eibishter, the revelation of the Eibishter is the Atzmus Ein Sof. It's higher than any boundaries, where the world and not the world doesn't matter to the Eibishter. So when you talk about a high level, you don't have to withdraw from the world. The world is not a stira to the greatness of the Eibishter. In the world, you could show the greatness of the Eibishter in the same degree than not in the world. And therefore, we're allowed to do malacha on Yantiv. Then it goes into a discussion. He says, wait a minute, Marchi didn't want we should work. He says we shouldn't work. So he goes and explains why Marchi thought we shouldn't work and why that fits with this whole puzzle. But at the end of the day, we see from here how Purim is really much greater than any other Yantiv in many different ways, and especially in the meaning of Simcha put it together. And there's definitely a lot of lessons here, and we see from here that in Galus, that the true to know who our true self is dafka in Galus, dafka when we don't have the shining love of Matan Torah, dafka when we don't have that revelation from the Eibishter, that's what shows our true color and shows ourself, and we're able to reveal the deepest self, which is connected to the Eibishter at a much higher level than we would otherwise. We should have a Freilich Purim.
Just a quick announcement. We're trying to make a minion.
Your stream will stop.
For Zachar at 9 o'clock. If anybody can come, please.